an investigation is underway in Dallas after a shooter armed with a rifle opened fire on an immigration and customs enforcement facility. One detainee there was killed, 2 others were wounded. No ICE agents were injured. The suspect then took his own life. President Trump says he was briefed on the deadly shooting. Authorities on the ground say ammunition found at the scene is providing clues into a motive. Correspondent Brooke Taylor is on the ground outside that ICE facility in Dallas with the latest. Good evening, Brooke.
Hi, Brett. Yeah, officials say that this is the result of dangerous anti-ICE rhetoric that only encourages violence and has to stop before more people are killed. The FBI says that anti-ICE messages were found on rounds near the shooter here. 3 detainees were also shot. Officials say the sniper shot from a nearby rooftop and opened fire indiscriminately on the entire ICE facility, including a van in that Sally Port. So what we know, these 3 detainees in that van were struck. 1 died and 2 others are injured. According to ICE, no ICE agents were shot or hurt. Officials say the shooter, who sources identify as 29-year-old Joshua John, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wounds.
We found bullets throughout the entire building that had punctured into the facility, targeting the entire ICE facility.
And you could see bullets even struck this framed American flag in the facility. This is the latest in a string of targeted attacks on ICE facilities in Texas. A man was arrested last month for making a bomb threat against this same facility. In July, a group ambushed officers outside a separate Texas ICE facility. 1 officer was shot but survived. Officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, say this kind of rhetoric must stop.
You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell.
And the acting ICE director says that assaults on agents are up by 1,000%, Brett.
Brooke, thank you.
Nicole Parker, former FBI special agent and Fox News contributor. I mean, as you hear Chad Wolf lay that out, I mean, that is specific. What else should we know at this point? What are we looking at?
I do think that that's absolutely critical to the investigation, is the anti-ICE sentiments written on the shell casings, and we are seeing a pattern of that. We saw, writings on shell casings with Mangione, with the Charlie Kirk tragedy, things of this nature. It's becoming common. People are getting inspired by others, and I appreciate Senator Ted Cruz, very, very strong, saying this will not be tolerated. This has got to stop. Some things that I picked up on, Harris, as a former FBI agent. The FBI will take lead of this investigation because it was an attack on a federal facility and an attack potentially on federal officers, these ICE officers. Having done prisoner transport, obviously a little bit different. I know that when I've done prisoner transport to the federal detention center, and in Miami, for example, we pull in our vehicle with the subject in the back of the car. We pull into the Sally Port, and there's literally a gate that comes down before we get out of our vehicle. So it looks like maybe the ICE facility in Dallas has a different sort of protocol there, that this individual is able to haphazardly fire to a van. So again, their target, they don't even seem to have had eyes on the target. They were just firing at whoever was in the van. And earlier you had on Trey Gowdy, who asked a very good question about motive. But I think as a result of the press conference, it is probably a target on the ICE officers and not on the individuals that were being processed.
Here's something new that is just coming in. My team is telling me this now. To make your point, Nicole, it was an unmarked, hard-sided van. So the fact that there were detainees in it, probably not known, or heavily perhaps not known by the person who was firing, because it was difficult to see who would have been in that van. Finish your point. I just wanted to get that in there.
You are exactly right, Harris. That is a very, very important point to the investigation. Again, a lot of times these are, like you said, an unmarked van. This is something that when they're doing these ERO operations, I know that the FBI has helped with many of them. It's kind of an all hands on deck with Trump's platform and getting rid of those that are not here legally. Most of the time the hits are earlier in the morning. And so this person, again, without knowing, may know the pattern and may have been keeping an eye on this ICE facility and knowing, okay, they typically do these processings early in the morning. So, they'll do a full investigation to this individual when they were typically seen around the facility, if they were seen around doing surveillance leading up to this tragedy. But it will be an FBI investigation. I do know that the FBI's evidence response team from the Dallas field office is on the ground at the facility processing the crime scene. This will be an all hands on deck. Obviously, the subject is deceased with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, so this will not be going to trial potentially, but don't kid yourself. The FBI is going to do a full investigation to see if this individual is linked to anybody else. And we've been talking about this constant attacks on ICE. This is unacceptable. It cannot continue to happen in our country. These are officers that are putting their lives on the line every single day. They did not make up these laws. They are enforcing laws that have been on the books forever. And frankly, it is because of Joe Biden's open border that they are dealing with this problem in the first place. Millions of people crossed into our country illegally, and Trump is doing everything he can to make sure that people are removed from our nation.
I want to point out to something. You were talking about the FBI investigation, and the lower part of our screen was saying that the FBI, and we learned this in the news conference, is investigating this as targeted violence.
Fox News alert, a deadly shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas this morning. The FBI confirming 2 people were shot and the gunman taking his life afterward. The FBI also confirming they found unused bullet casings engraved with the phrase anti-ICE into it. No ICE officers were harmed. FBI Director Kash Patel says these politically motivated attacks are not a one-off, and the targeting of law enforcement officers has to end. Here's Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who spoke moments ago at the scene.
This needs to stop. Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the 3rd shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis. We need to learn to work together without demonizing each other, without attacking each other. Violence has no place. It is wrong. And we should come together. If we want to have a debate about immigration policies, we can do so in the halls of Congress without demonizing each other, and especially without demonizing the men and women who every day put on a badge and go risk their lives to keep us safe.
Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno here with my co-host, Kayleigh McEnany. And also joining us today, Molly Lyons, Fox News correspondent, Kennedy, host of the Kennedy Saves the World podcast, and Bill Hemmer, co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Now let's go live to Brooke Taylor on the ground there in Dallas, Texas, with the latest on this tragic story. Brooke.
Hi, guys. Yeah, officials just wrapped up that press conference, and really the biggest takeaway for me was the fact that these anti-ICE shell casings were found near the shooter, because there were a lot of questions about who was the target during this attack. I believe we probably have that picture here that the FBI shared where you could see the words anti-ICE engraved in one of those shell casings there. So this is up. We're getting new updates by the minute, but I'll break it down for you what we know so far. So the shooter, police say, was at a building next to this ICE facility, started firing into an unmarked van, and we're told from officials that 3 detainees inside of that van were shot at. One of the detainees died, and then the gunman turned the gun on himself, and he was shot and killed as well. Officials during this press conference spoke a lot about the rhetoric surrounding ICE agents, how it has to stop, or you have something like this happen. Take a listen to what they said during this press conference.
This is the second time I've had to stand in front of you and talk about a shooter. at one of my facilities. And I think that the takeaway from all of this is that the rhetoric has to stop. There are people out there who are seeing what is being placed online, and they're coming and they're doing acts of violence against ICE employees. So that's kind of all I have for today, is that it's just got to stop. It's dangerous, and people are losing their lives.
And officials say that no ICE agents or officers were hurt in this shooting, while again, the shooter had these anti-ICE messages on the bullets. Instead, he ended up shooting 3 of these detainees. Again, one of them has died. And I just want to mention, at the same ICE facility, there was a bomb threat last month. And then 2 months ago, right here in Texas, nearby at a separate ICE facility, there was an ambush against officers where one officer was shot and thankfully survived that, guys.
Brooke Taylor, thank you so much. Bill Hemmer, I want to read what the FBI director posted on X earlier this morning. I mentioned it earlier, and it bears worth noting at the top here. These despicable, politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off. He says we are only miles from Prairieland, Texas, where just 2 months ago, an individual ambushed a separate ICE facility targeting their officers. It has to end, he says. And the FBI and our partners will lead these investigative efforts to see to it that those who target our law enforcement are pursued and brought to the fullest extent of justice. Now here, obviously, the gunman took his own life. We will not be having a criminal justice closure, but at the end of the day, these attacks have to stop, and there has to be deterrence to do so.
I would just caution all of us, folks at home, we are so early into this story. We don't have a name. We don't have a picture. We haven't ID'd the alleged gunman who apparently was dead on a rooftop in Dallas. We have an indication of a motive, but let's see if we can dig a little deeper here. What feels at the moment, if all this continues to go in the trend that it currently is, it feels like a copycat move. It feels like, you know, there is a trend that is moving that direction that sort of drafts off the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And whether or not that continues to be the case, we don't know. Look, they haven't answered many questions in Utah. They haven't answered many questions in Butler, PA from a year ago. There's a lot of things we do not know. There are psychiatrists now diving into why you would engrave anything on a shell casing if indeed you did not survive, or even if you did survive, that would go to motivation there. And you know, viewers at home, you can look it up yourself, you can Google it and go find it. But what was written in Utah sort of leaves this trail and leaves this message, and it's a sick and demented mind there. School shootings have been so prominent in America for more than a decade that some really smart people are writing about why you would do something like this if it continues to go this way. And the sick psychology suggests that a school shooting is no longer as significant as it used to be. Think about that if that's the case. You have to go so far as to leave a message or a meme that would be picked up by your own loyal followers so they could look to you, this little group, wherever they are and how many they are, look to you as a hero of the moment. That's a really dark place. I think what Ted Cruz said there is your political opponents are not Nazis. Like, where does it go? How do we stop this? What do we say? Most of the White House officials went dark for now because they're trying to figure out the answers. And Dana and I were on the air for 2 hours watching this, and we could see it in real time. They didn't close up shop, but they were just like, hang on, let's get our act together here. There's going to be a major news conference at some point today, and it's going to take us, potentially, ladies, down another one of these dark holes, which is where we were just about 2 weeks ago in Utah. And I don't know where that ends.
Prevalence normalizes, Kaylee. Prevalence of rhetoric, demonizing your opponent, your political party. Prevalence of horrific shootings normalizes. Where do we go from here?
Emily, you're exactly right. This demonization of ICE needs to stop. Just last night, Governor Gavin Newsom sat on late night television and said these are authoritarian actions, talking about ICE. Jasmine Crockett, September 25th, said they are slave patrols, okay? Slave patrols. Governor Walz, modern day Gestapo is what he called ICE. Pritzker said with these ICE raids, we're essentially becoming Nazi Germany. Jayapal said they were deranged. Dan Goldman said they were the secret police. Swalwell, KGB officer in Russia. There are other lesser-known elected officials on the left who said they were kidnappers, vigilantes, thugs. I could do the entire 51 minutes left of this show going over what ICE has been called again and again and again. Now, we know there's things we know, there's things we don't know. We know anti-ICE was written on the bullet. But the one thing I know with certainty is this rhetoric must end, because this attack is not in isolation. September 14th, there was an ICE officer who was ran over with the car. September 12th, dragged from a car, an ICE officer. September 1st, there was a protest of ICE with a guillotine at the protest. August 25th, arrested a suspect with bomb threats on a Dallas ICE facility. Again, we could list the violence against ICE for the entirety of this show. Stop demonizing hardworking law enforcement. They are brave. They are doing God's work. They are protecting people who could lose their life in any given city at any given time because an illegal alien crossed the border illegally and commits violence. Stop demonizing them. They are heroes. And today, this very much looks like, look at that, anti-ICE on a bullet.
The horrific pattern that we've been seeing play out, Kennedy, the same demonization of our president that has resulted in 2 attempted assassinations and potentially more that we don't know about, thwarted earlier, Charlie Kirk's assassination, and now these anti-ICE. I fear for the one that's successful. And it was successful for the families of those dead individuals right now. They may not have been ICE officers, but the target remains, and that's still a loss of life.
Yeah, and their lives are still precious. And that's a thing that we have lost sight of, is our humanity. And not everyone, because I think most people look around at this and they just ask themselves, how did we get here? Like, what am I supposed to tell my children? How am I going to comfort my kids so they feel safe going out into this world where there could be people among them who are seemingly normal on the surface, but then below the surface, they are being radicalized, you know, in these small groups that Bill talked about. And, you know, you get to a scary point where it feels like there is a great deal of instability, and you look around and you wonder, what's next? I don't want the next. You know, and I understand why the White House isn't saying anything today, because a lot of people who knew Charlie Kirk, people who were moved by Charlie Kirk, people who had never seen a video of his until he was assassinated, they're still trying to process this. Like, it is too fresh. And, you know, we look what happened in the aftermath of Luigi Mangione and the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. And, you know, he was lionized essentially as a saint by some. And there are some very sick people who are deranged, they're mentally ill, they have been radicalized, they are narcissistic, and they look at the fallout from that and they say, that's what I want. That is not what I want. That is not what most people want. We don't want to live in a society like this, because that is not a difference of opinion. That is a murderous cult that does irreparable harm, and we have to figure out a way to stop it, because words are not violence, but right now words are not enough, and we have to do something else.
In the wake of the Charlie Kirk shooting, the governor there, Spencer Cox, talked about how this was an attack on all of us. And I view it the same way, particularly on attack on free speech, an attack on religion, an attack on abilities to gather together and talk about what clearly needs to be talked about. And this raises that point yet again. And the intentions of people, the political violence that everyone is speaking out against now and standing up against, the victims, the ultimate victims, may not ever be the intended target of someone's problematic mind. They can be the other people in the surrounding area. In this case, we may potentially find the grieving families of potential detainees. In the case of the attack on President Trump, Corey Kemper-Torrey in Butler, Pennsylvania, killed there. If we can't gather together and talk, whether it's in a big political stand or just to live in society, we're going to end up with a lot of these types of challenges. And ICE, as we've talked about throughout the morning, the motivations of this particular individual on the ground in Texas, ICE has to deal with what's happening around them in that moment. They're not thinking necessarily about the motive of this person, but saving lives and neutralizing a threat in that moment. And yet they're dealing with this problematic situation that is popping up, and they have to determine on the ground in a moment, is this a rioter that we're dealing with? Is this a protester? And that was the challenge with the other attack that happened on July 4th. The people that were involved in that, who the government says had some tactical gear. There were shots fired. There was a police officer shot. Now some of those people that are in that case are arguing that they were just protesters. So in the moment, out there on the streets, we need to remember that ICE is dealing with what they can see around them, whether it's at a facility that is an identifiable tie to ICE or out on the streets of America where they're trying to do their job.
This is why Jimmy Kimmel needed to say, I'm sorry. And he didn't. And he needs to.
Yep.
And he needs to call Erica Kirk and talk to her. And he needs to go on his program and say, I had this lovely conversation with this grieving widow, and this is what we discussed. I mean, that's the proper way you manage this, and that did not happen yet.
We begin, though, with Brooke Taylor. She is on the ground in Dallas with an update for us right now. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, guys. Yeah, officials spent most of this press conference talking about how this anti-ICE rhetoric has to stop, or you have this violence like this happen. Federal agents, they're just trying to enforce the law, these officials say. The FBI is now investigating this as a targeted act. Here is what we know. Homeland Security says that before 7 a.m., a sniper started shooting from a nearby rooftop and fired indiscriminately at the ICE facility, including a van that was in the Sallyport. DHS says 3 detainees in that van were shot, and at least one of the detainees was killed. The gunman then turned the gun on himself. Officials say no ICE agents were hurt. The FBI, though, shared pictures of rounds found right near that shooter with anti-ICE engraved on those shell casings. This is the latest in a string of targeted attacks on ICE facilities right here in Texas. At this same facility, a man was arrested for making a bomb threat last month. Then in July, a group ambushed officers outside a separate Texas ICE facility. One officer was shot and survived that shooting. Senator Ted Cruz was here at this press conference and spoke about this violence.
Violence has no place. It is wrong. And we should come together. If we want to have a debate about immigration policies, we can do so in the halls of Congress without demonizing each other, and especially without demonizing the men and women who every day put on a badge and go risk their lives to keep us safe.
And of course, so many responding to this attack this afternoon. Vice President J.D. Vance posted a statement on X saying, quote, the obsessive attack on law enforcement, particularly ICE, must stop. You also have Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He tweeted, quote, this assassination will not slow our arrest, detention, and deportation of illegal immigrants. Again, guys, this happened outside of a processing center where illegal migrants are taken to get processed after they're arrested by ICE.
All right, Brooke Taylor in Dallas on the scene for us there. Stand by. Thank you.
All right, Bill Daley's a former FBI investigator and joins us now. I mean, this almost seems like a daily occurrence, Bill, that we have another day, the sun comes up, dawn breaks, and another politically motivated shooting. It's just no sign of stopping.
It's horrible, John. And you know, John, over these past several months and even the past since the administration took over, you know, we've seen this kind of push by politicians and other people around ICE facilities. They've gone as far as even some of these elected officials kind of, you know, trying to force their way in, stopping vehicles. So, you know, it is kind of a buildup of what we've seen over the past few months, only to this point to a deadly level. You know, I think a lot of people speak about this rhetoric. You know, I'll cite a few things, but I know a lot of people speaking about it like to talk more about the investigation. But, you know, when you have elected officials calling ICE agents, you know, agents, modern Gestapo agents, or, you know, governors moving to not have masks on ICE agents because they want people to know who they are so they can go after them. You know, all of these things are lead up to people who might be prone, who are driven in a certain with ideology or direction, as we've seen today, and they carry out these horrific acts.
Bill, what is with this? I don't know if you would call it a trend, but for lack of a better word, the trend we're seeing where these assassins and mass shooters now like to try and carve
little messages on shell casings before they carry out these shootings. Is this something that you have seen before the last few months, or is this new?
This is, I mean, it may happen periodically over a period of time where individuals, murderers, or other people may do something similar to this, but it's not a trend. This seems to be certainly a trend. You know, we saw it with the Mangione shooting in New York against the United Healthcare CEO, where he left those bullets on the sidewalk. We saw it with Charlie Kirk's shooter, and now here. So, you hate to say copycat, but certainly all the hallmarks of it is, within the past few weeks, months, if you will, we have people doing the same thing. The other thing, Jillian, I want to talk about is the FBI's investigating this. I think, a couple of positive things to be taken away from this. A, law enforcement was extremely responsive to this. FBI there on the scene. I think under the leadership of Director Patel, they're trying to be very forward-leaning and transparent. That was mentioned both by the SAC, agent in charge of the Dallas office, as well as Director Patel, who came out and posted those images that you just referenced. So they're trying to be as transparent, as forward-leaning as they can, and to help the American people not start to spin their wheels with worrying, who's this shooting, is that they were able to provide some clarity pretty quickly with releasing that photo.
I want to come back, Bill, to this idea of the rhetoric. This is Joshua Johnson, who's the I.C.E director there in Dallas. Here's what he said a little more than an hour ago.
This is the second time I've had to stand in front of you and talk about a shooter at one of my facilities. And I think that the takeaway from all of this is that the rhetoric has to stop. There are people out there who are seeing what is being placed online, and they're coming and they're doing acts of violence against ICE employees.
We should mention that there were the shootings at ICE facilities in Texas not long ago. Add to this. And then you have the shooter, who sources identified at Fox News as 29-year-old Joshua John. We're trying to find out more about this individual who takes a gun. Looks like, according to the stripper clip that we saw a picture of posted by the FBI director, that it was just a typical hunting rifle with a capacity of 5 cartridges. Takes that weapon, aims it at the ICE facility, starts firing at will, and then takes their own life. And is it this rhetoric that people just keep doubling down on that suddenly causes someone to snap?
With kind of borrowing a little bit from my behavioral analysis friends, you just don't know what reaches a individual and what breaking point they have. And although many people can kind of, flick this rhetoric off as being just that, political rhetoric, it does affect a number of people. And I think today, John, with all of the various sources that people getting information, or ones that maybe want to lock themselves into with regard to social media or news outlets, and they're hearing it over and over again, the fragility of people where they are at any particular moment may lead them to commit one of these acts. But the other thing, too, John, as we look into this investigation, and the FBI is doing this right now, is to find out, where did this person, where were they getting this information from? Where was he being, if you want to call it, kind of radicalized to conduct one of these acts? Who was he around? Was he talking to other people about this? It's the same thing they're going through right now, still on the heels of the investigation of the Charlie Kirk assassination, is to find out who else might be in the orbit of this person who may have either encouraged, provided information, in any way knew about these plans and didn't come forward. So, there's still a lot of stones to be turned over in this investigation.
We've been talking a lot on this channel, Bill, this week about mask mandates for ICE officers. A new rule proposed and put forward by Governor Gavin Newsom. Take a listen to what he said on Saturday. I want to get your response.
I'll be signing a bill, the first in the nation, saying enough. To ICE, unmask. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of?
How does that play into all of this when we're talking about the identities of specific individual ICE agents?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what they're afraid of. They're afraid of something that occurred today, and they're afraid of something that may happen to them or their families if they're identified. We're not talking about normal, everyday police operations where people in patrol cars or FBI agents are out there conducting, everyday activities, but when they're involved in these more contentious issues, which seem to be in certain locales more contentious than others, is they're very much concerned about their well-being and safety of themselves and their families who may come under attack. Could be everything from people showing up at their doorstep. Very easy today, a couple of clicks away, you can find out who somebody is by an image and therefore where they live. So those are the things people are concerned about. So I mean, you have to really, when the governor says that, you have to say, well, what is he then saying? He's saying that it's okay for all these people to then be further exposed because what? They're carrying out their duties as sworn law enforcement officers of this country, carrying out the laws have been prescribed by Congress. So, I mean, I think we have to take a look at that very sobering. The other thing, Jillian, is that, with a lot of the talk about, people having due process. Well, today, two of these people who are being just detained are denied their due process because they've been killed.
Right.
So when you flip that around, you have to say, what is really happening here when someone's willing to take not just someone's life, if the intention was to take an ICE agent's life or ICE agent's life, but also the due process of those people who are just being detained. They've not been convicted, and there's been no other specific allegations lodged against them, and their due process now has halted.
Yes, you have a gunman who allegedly was anti-ICE by the inscribings on the cartridges, the shell casing, and it ended up that it was detainees who died here. Exactly. You mentioned this idea of risk and danger for agents who go out there every day, and they are just merely carrying out the laws of the United States of America. We heard personally from one of them back in July on Martha's show, The Story. Her name is Selena. Listen to what she told us.
I'm very proud to say that I work for ICE, and to have to take off my polo or, hide behind so that way my family is not put in danger or my colleagues are not put in danger. And I'm very, like I said, proud to work for ICE and to have to kind of put my polo down or my badge away for, for the safety of us.
So she says that when she's not on the streets there doing her job, she's got to go unidentified because of the potential risk to her or her family.
Exactly right, John. And it all ties back to what we first started speaking about. It's this rhetoric. It's when elected officials are out there on national television saying that, these ICE agents are modern day Gestapo. Well, what are you supposed to do? I mean, if somebody heard that, during World War II, what are they inclined to do? They act out. And so, by using those words and describing people in a fashion who are law enforcement officers of the country sworn to uphold the current laws of our country, of not being guided by politics here, but by the law. And they very much concerned about their safety, and it makes sense that they need to protect themselves. So, I hope there's superseding federal statutes that will allow for all these federal officers and ICE agents to continue to cover themselves in states like California and other jurisdictions where they need to do it.
All right, Bill, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking time with us on this story. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
You're very welcome.
This needs to stop. Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis. We need to learn to work together without demonizing each other, without attacking each other. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of law enforcement. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of ICE and CBP and everyone who puts their lives on the line to keep us safe. The divisive rhetoric tragically has real consequences. I hope that every one of us will pray Number one, for the safety of law enforcement that are risking their lives to keep us safe. Number two, for the health of those who were shot and injured today. We still don't know the full details of who was injured, but for the families also of the victims of this shooting. Violence has no place. It is wrong. And we should come together. If we want to have a debate about immigration policies, we can do so in the halls of Congress without demonizing each other, and especially without demonizing the men and women who every day put on a badge and go risk their lives to keep us safe. And we should not be putting language out there that inspires madmen to commit evil crimes. Our prayers are with the men and women of law enforcement, and we ought to come together and have some decency across the political aisle to say this violence is wrong and it needs to stop.
Senator, have you been told that immigrant detainees were the victims of today's shooting?
My understanding is the details of who the victims are still being ascertained, so I don't want to go ahead of law enforcement releasing these details. What they have said is that no law enforcement was injured, and so that's a natural inference, but I don't know the details.
The FBI is investigating this incident as an act of targeted violence.
The rhetoric has to stop. Is that it's just got to stop. It's dangerous, and people are losing their lives.
Right now, federal agents digging into the background of Joshua John, the 29-year-old our sources are naming as the suspected gunman in the deadly Dallas ICE shooting. Welcome back as America Reports rolls into a second hour. I'm John Roberts in Washington, and good to spend it with you. Tough news again today.
It is. Again, another shooting today on this Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jillian Turner in for Sandra today. So we have learned that the suspect was registered as an independent in the state of Oklahoma. You're looking right now at photos from the FBI that show anti-ICE scrawled on a bullet casing that was found on the scene. Bullet holes ripped through an American flag as well, a display inside that Dallas facility.
Officials are calling it an act of targeted violence, coming just 4 weeks to the day after the Catholic school shooting in Minneapolis and just 2 weeks after Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah.
Jason Chaffetz is here on the surge in ideological violence plaguing the country as Republicans point to anti-ICE rhetoric on the left like this before today's shooting.
Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
The real thing that's happening here are the egregious ICE raids.
As somebody who understands history, when I see ICE, I see slave patrols.
The Deputy Director of ICE is Madison Sheehan, and she joins us now. It's a busy day, Madison. Thank you very much for coming in. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
So we want to get into the climate around all of this in just a moment. But first of all, you were sharing with us a moment ago and asked you to share it with the audience. A lot of new information about the shooting and how it all unfolded.
Absolutely. So this is an ongoing investigation being led by Dallas Police Department as well as the FBI. We'll always defer to our partners and allow them to conduct this investigation. But what we do know so far is that this shooter was firing indiscriminately throughout the whole building. And so this shooter was at a building nearby and shooting directly into the building, going across the entire length of the building and then including into the Sally Port, which is then where we're seeing a lot of the focus of the investigation in that Sally Port area. But you saw the photos of the American flag and saw that this punctured into the facility. This could have put law enforcement officers in a very dangerous situation. And we're already dealing with casualties of the illegal aliens. That is a tragedy in itself. And we're praying for them and their families and the law enforcement officers that responded to this scene.
So just to be clear again, it was believed early on in the investigation that the Sally Port was specifically targeted, but you're saying that's not the case? The entire building was this assailant's target?
We found bullets throughout the entire building that had punctured into the facility, targeting the entire ICE facility.
Wow. Can you tell us anything about the victims, what countries they're believed to be from, or any identifying information at all?
So we're working with our local officers to identify next of kin and make sure those notifications are made. Until that time, I don't want to jump ahead of any of the next of kin or families dealing with this tragedy.
But I mean, I think they were in ICE detention custody. They were being put into detention. Is it safe to extrapolate that ICE believes that they were in the country illegally?
So these were aliens that were arrested, brought into ICE's custody, were being processed at this facility, and then would have been moved to a long-term detention facility.
You know, we have seen the pictures, and we can put it back up again, of the stripper clip with 5 rounds. And you have more information about the weapon itself.
Yeah, so we're working with the FBI to identify the weapon. We're obviously assuming it's a long-range weapon, not looking like a modern firearm at the time, but we'll continue to investigate with the FBI of the actual weapon and what was used in the process.
Stripper clips like that are typically used in a Mauser, used in an M1 as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
These are very similar weapons that we've seen being used in multiple attacks in recent day.
Have you ever seen anything like this before, that message that the FBI director tweeted out on that casing that said anti-ICE?
I think you're seeing anti-ICE rhetoric all over the country right now. I mean, we're being compared, our officers who are putting themselves at risk to protect the American people, to remove the worst from our communities. They're seeing this anti-ICE rhetoric all over the place. We're being compared to the Gestapo, to the Nazis, and that's just not true. And it's dangerous rhetoric that puts us in situations like this. Men and women of law enforcement go out every day to protect the American people, to put the American people first, to keep our communities safer. And we're going out and demonizing them and doing things against what men and women of ICE are doing when they really should just be thanked for their service.
I mean, we have to remind people at home that ICE is carrying out the laws of the United States of America. And what ICE is doing now is no different than what was done during the Obama administration, when many people in his own party termed him, quote, the deporter in chief. Why the difference, though, between what happened, and it was really focused around 2013 to 2015, and what's happening now?
Well, I always remind people the men and women of ICE are enforcing immigration laws. It's written. We're not picking winners and losers. We're going out and enforcing the laws that are on the books. These are the same laws that Obama enforced. But President Trump is taking the stand and making sure that we're enforcing the law as it's written, with the support of Secretary Noem leading the way to make sure we get these dangerous criminals removed from our community. And the left has chosen to make that a political punchline and using that against the men and women of ICE and truly putting them in harm's way. This facility in particular isn't the first time that they've had violence at this facility. This facility faced a bomb threat just weeks ago. We had the Prairie Land attack also in Texas, and we're continuing to see this heightened rhetoric that forces our officers to be in an increased security posture as well while they're out doing their job.
What else can be done? I mean, you just focused on the rhetoric, but even if everybody stopped commenting on ICE publicly, period, tomorrow, it wouldn't stop deranged psychopaths like the shooter today from trying to perpetrate attacks against officers. What else would you like to see happen?
Well, obviously, we know the internet is a deep, dark place, and you can find a lot of this rhetoric there, and it continues to increase. I would say the biggest thing as an American people, we need to understand that these are times for us to come together. These are moments that both the right and the left can come together, understand that there is an increased level of violence in the United States, and we want to make sure that we're putting our law enforcement officers in the best posture to not only be safe, but go home to their families at night. These are men and women who live in the community just like you and I. And we want to make sure that they're safe in their own homes, but also safe when they go to work, when they're working to protect us.
Do you know anything more about the assailant, 29-year-old Joshua John? We know that he is registered as an independent in Oklahoma. He voted in the November election last year. I'm sure that his social media is being scrubbed, trying to find out what he was thinking prior to this.
Absolutely. The FBI and the Dallas Police Department, as well as Homeland Security investigations, are working hand in hand to make sure that we're scrubbing social media sites, investigating, interviewing those that were around him, as well as looking into any properties or vehicles that he may be associated with. And throughout this process, more and more information will come to light as we learn it. And we maintain being committed to transparency throughout this process. My first phone call this morning when I received this was to Secretary Noem, and she's been actively engaged every 15 minutes receiving updates. This is a secretary that cares about the American people, that care about the men and women of ICE, so that way she can update the president as well. But Secretary Noem has been incredibly hands-on throughout this process. And our thoughts and prayers are with the families that are affected, as well as the law enforcement officers that have been responding to this scene.
Well, we know today is not an easy day for you to kind of take time out to come join us here, but we really appreciate it. It's more important information than ever before. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. See you again, hopefully under better circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Madison. All right, Fox News Alert. We want to jet to Concord, North Carolina, where the vice president is speaking about violence. Let's listen in.
Enforcing our border, and I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happens. Because here's what happens when Democrats like Gavin Newsom did say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. When the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America. Just yesterday, NBC News, maybe the worst of all the fake news, and I'm sure we have an NBC reporter out there. It's a tough competition, my friends, to be clear. But maybe the worst, I said maybe the worst, is NBC News. And they said that immigration enforcement, you know what they said? That immigration enforcement had detained a 5-year-old autistic girl in order to get to that girl's father. Turned out that story was a complete fabrication. It was a complete dishonest lie. But when you go around and lie about our law enforcement and you tell them that they're mistreating 5-year-old girls, what do you think is going to happen? When Democratic politicians incur doxing, when they encourage us to unmask ICE enforcement officers, what do you think is going to happen? When the mayor of Los Angeles encourages violent protesters to get in the face of our law enforcement, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is political violence, and political violence has gotten out of control in this country. We got to stop it. We got to condemn it. And that starts, unfortunately, at the very top of the Democratic Party. If you want to stop political violence, stop attacking our law enforcement as the Gestapo. If you want to stop political violence, stop telling your supporters that everybody who disagrees with you is a Nazi. If you want to stop political violence, look in the mirror. That's the way that we stop political violence in this country, and we've got to do it. And while we're all mourning and rooting for and praying for everybody who was injured at that ICE facility, and as far as we know, it looks like some of the detainees, in other words, some of the potential illegal aliens, were some of those who were affected. Look, just because we don't support illegal aliens, we don't want them to be executed by violent assassins engaged in political violence either. So we're praying both for our ICE agents, but also for everybody who's affected by this terrible attack. But that was an ICE facility. And as these guys behind me know, and a few of our police officers know, police officers writ large face too many threats of violence all across the United States of America. And we know where it started. We all remember the summer of 2020 when all of these violent protesters were encouraged to treat police as the enemy instead of as the solution. You'd take 1,000 police officers, you'd find one person who didn't do something perfect, and use that one guy to tarnish the other 999 police officers. Well, I would like everybody, whether a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, especially those in political leadership, can we all just agree that our police officers are heroes, that they are public servants, and that the first and most important step of keeping all of us safe is to keep our police officers safe, because they are the thin blue line between civilization and chaos. Thank you all.
All right, the vice president there in North Carolina saying that it's time to tone down the rhetoric, that ICE should be celebrated for carrying out the laws of this great nation, not attacked by people on the left, and that it's all got to change.
We bring in acting ICE Director Todd Lyons. Good to have you with us, Director. This is obviously a very tragic day. I'd love to ask you what you think you are understanding based on the early investigation about what happened here this morning.
So, yeah, it was such a tragic incident that just saw it unfolded so quickly. But what you saw was you had a sniper on a roof who was firing into that open area, which is a sally port, which is where we bring in our detainees and prisoners when they're going to be processed and put in the facility. You know, looking at it, he was a definite target of the ICE facility itself was a target. You saw from those photos, the windows were shot out in the buildings. The lobby doors were shot, and he fired into an open area that just had no roof covering. The detainees weren't outside the vehicle. He was just firing at ICE vehicles. I'm extremely proud of the brave men and women that were on the ground. They went into those vehicles to rescue those detainees while they under fire. So it wasn't directed at the detainees. It wasn't directed at civilians on the street. It was a definite attack on law enforcement. He was there to attack that building.
You know, thanks to you opening up this opportunity for us in July, we were at this facility and we interviewed some of the ICE agents, very hardworking people who were very proud of the work that they do here. Here is one young woman, Selena, talking about the threat that they were facing. Watch.
We're here to protect the public. We're here to enforce immigration enforcement. You know, I'm very proud to say that I work for ICE, and to have to take off my polo or, you know, hide behind so that way my family is not put in danger or my colleagues are not put in danger.
So I'm thinking about all those people that we met down there and spoke with. How are they all feeling today in the wake of this?
You know, everyone's really shook up. Everyone's really scared because this is, like I said, a pure attack on ICE. You know, I know so many of those officers and agents down there. That's where I started my career. The windows that they show is my old office. So whoever was sitting in my old chair had to, you know, duck under the desk. You know, these men and women, they go to work just to complete a law enforcement mission. I get asked all the time what keeps me up at night. It's the safety of the men and women of ICE, and it's just getting worse. It's what what the vice president said. It just has to stop.
So what do we know? And, you know, one of these detainees was killed. We also that day saw rows of detainees just calmly sitting in chairs. Some of them were outside relaxing at a picnic table under one of those sally ports. And they were in various stages of, you know, presenting documentation or going through processes. But it was all being handled very professionally from what we saw and reported that day. What do we know about this individual? Because this pattern is so disturbing. Another sniper positioned shooter etching things onto bullets. What is going on here? Who is this guy?
And that's what's scary. So the FBI did identify him, as Brooke said. He does have a criminal history. I don't want to get too far ahead of the FBI, but that's someone that's obviously has an issue with ICE. You just don't randomly pick up a sniper rifle and etch anti-ICE sentiment and comments on rounds like that. We were talking earlier. It's hard to do that. Someone has to take the time to do that. And it's a scary thought because, as you said, where he fired into, it wasn't just detainees or law enforcement officers. That was a waiting area where attorneys are that are there to see their clients, the public that's there visiting. I-35 is a major highway right there. And you saw those bullets penetrated through the lobby, into the wall, into the flag. People going to work, going to school could have been killed on I-35.
So we said the name before, Joshua John. I believe he's 29 years old. There is some suggestion that there is a police car positioned outside another home right now in Texas. We're waiting to confirm that to see if they are zeroing in on where he lived or where his family members lived. Give us just, you know, the broad strokes of what we are learning about him. You said he had a criminal history, violent criminal history?
From what I'm being told, it was for drugs. So, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of Director Patel's investigation, but he was known to law enforcement. And we're going to see over the next 24 hours what FBI can do and figure out. Obviously, they're going to get rid of all his contacts, scrub his social media, maybe go to his parents' home or where he was living. But they want to drill down and figure out what made him anti-ICE, what made him want to do that, and see if there's any co-conspiracy, see if the facility is still safe, see if anything else is planned. But we're still in the early stages. And obviously, what we got to do first and foremost is protect the men and women of ICE, harden up our facilities, make sure we're safe. But then we really got to target these people that are anti-ICE rhetoric or causing threats, and really take it deep down and see what happened with this gentleman right here.
I mean, as you say, we're just in the early stages of understanding this person and what his motivation may have been. But it raises questions. You have these sniper attacks. This is not normal. This is not even what you saw in California at that marijuana farm, which is, more of just like disgruntled protester. In one case, though, I should remember, there was a guy with a gun who was pointing a gun at ICE officials. But this kind of calculated sniper attack that we saw in Charlie Kirk's situation, and we're seeing that video from California there, the sniper attacks that were against President Trump, are these inspiring each other as a law enforcement person? Does this concern you that we're seeing a trend here?
It does. It really does. And Secretary Noem had a great quote. What she put out on X is that this language and the rhetoric is so vile against us, and it's feeding off of it. She was so concerned. She's been leading from the front. She was on the phone with me and the deputy director, caring about men and women of ICE. She's making sure that we have all the resources we need. But to her point, the rhetoric and just the comments, disgusting comments made about ICE officers, their families, and what we do for mission is really spurring all of these attacks, and it's only going to get worse.
You know what? I want to play this conversation. Governor Gavin Newsom was on last night with Stephen Colbert, and what he said is getting a lot of attention today. The vice president pointed it out earlier. I want to play it for you, get your reaction. Let's watch.
If some guy jumped out of an unmarked car in a van with a mask on, tried to grab me, I mean, by definition, you're going to push back. And so these are not just authoritarian tendencies. These are authoritarian actions by an authoritarian government.
What would you say to the governor about that?
Oh, it's completely ridiculous. Completely. If you look at any of the videos, the arrests we make, Fox has been around with us, CNN, ABC, men, women of ICE, and the other federal partners that we're with, clearly identified, have badges, have the vest. They know who they are. These individuals know ICE is looking for them. And his no mask secret police law, we wouldn't have to have it if politicians like that weren't calling for the doxing of ICE agents. We're calling for threats on their family. I've said it all the time, I don't like the masks, but if you look at the beginning of this administration, up until March, we didn't have to wear it. It wasn't until people started going out and championing against the law enforcement mission the men and the women of ICE do every day, that they started doing that. They're protecting themselves, protecting their family.
How are you going to protect your agents?
We have, we're going to take a serious deep dive into that. We're going to make sure our buildings are hardened up. Our federal partners have been great coming to our support. But, I've never in my law enforcement career did I think I would have to go ahead and provide security and support to law enforcement officers trying to make an arrest.
So we remember the call for added ICE agents, recruiting more ICE agents. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was going really well initially. Yeah. Is that still happening, or are people too scared to get involved in this?
It still is, because I think people realize it's a noble mission. It's a law enforcement agency, right? It's not a secret police.
You wanted 100,000 more?
We're hiring 10,000 more, and we're already up to over 150,000 applicants. There are so many people that want to come out and join ICE, not just for be part of this deportation mission or the secret police. There are men and women that want to have a noble law enforcement profession, and that's what we offer. And that's what really, really disgusts me, is the fact that what the men and women of ICE are doing is a noble law enforcement. They're doing their sworn duty. They're following the laws that Congress has written.
And that was what I heard from the agents that we spoke to at this same Dallas office, that they said, when we go and apprehend someone, contrary to what you're hearing from Governor Newsom there, it's been a case. We've worked the case. We know where the person is. We're ready to apprehend them based on the case that we've built for removal. And, there was nothing, arbitrary about what they were explaining to us. And I hope you'll let us know if you learn more about this Joshua John, because his profile so far appears to be close to these other snipers, young men going off the rails. We saw what happened in Utah to Charlie Kirk, and we want to learn more about who this individual is and what's going on out there. So thank you very much, Director Lyons. Always good to have you with us. And we hope... we wish safety upon your agents out there as they do their jobs. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And you as well. Thank you very much.
Live from Texas, this is the Will Cain Show, and this is a Fox News alert. We have a problem, America. We are living through a scourge of left-wing political violence that 3 weeks into this month has made it Bloody September. Today, another attack on ICE. 3 people shot, 1 killed at a Dallas facility this morning. All 3 were detainees inside a law enforcement van. Right now, the FBI is looking into this as a targeted attack. One pretty damning piece of evidence shared by FBI Director Kash Patel, quote, while the investigation is ongoing, an initial review of the evidence shows an ideological motive behind this attack. One of the unspent shell casings recovered was engraved with the phrase, anti-ICE. More updates will be forthcoming. Anti-ICE, the latest engraving on a bullet meant for an ideological opponent. From Minnesota to Utah to now today in Texas. It's pretty hard to read this than any other way but that we have a crisis of violence brought on by a crisis of rhetoric in our politics. And it has to stop. Fascist, Nazi, authoritarian, Gestapo, secret police. These are just some of the phrases used by high-profile Democrat politicians across the last several years that has resulted in the brainwashing of a gullible population now bent and mobilized into violence. Stop now. Stop Jasmine Crockett. Stop AOC. Stop Ilhan Omar. Stop Gavin Newsom. But for you, it is already too late. Because for anyone that for the past couple of years, and even in the most recent of days, has been calling their opponent authoritarians or been calling ICE the Gestapo, you no longer have a legitimate seat at the American political conversation table. Vice President J.D. Vance laid that out this afternoon.
You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America. When Democratic politicians incur doxing, when they encourage us to unmask ICE enforcement officers, what do you think is going to happen? Political violence has gotten out of control in this country. We got to stop it. We got to condemn it. And that starts, unfortunately, at the very top of the Democratic Party.
Straight to hell and no place at the conversation table of American politics. Yes, I'm angry because we wake up every other day now with a targeted political assassination. But I'm not the only one who's fed up. So is ICE.
This is the second time I've had to stand in front of you and talk about a shooter at one of my facilities. And I think that the takeaway from all of this is that the rhetoric has to stop. It's just got to stop. It's dangerous, and people are losing their lives.
You don't have to be reminded, but maybe it escaped your attention as recently as last night on Stephen Colbert, California Governor Gavin Newsom has ensured that he cannot be taken seriously. That yes, no, in fact, Governor, you are guilty of hyperbole, but you're guilty of much more. It's now clear you're guilty of inspiring violence.
ICE, unmask. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? You're going to go out and you're going to do enforcement? Provide an ID. Tell us which agency you represent. Provide us basic information that all local law enforcement is required to provide.
There, on Saturday, he asks, what are you afraid of? Here's an idea, Governor. Why don't you ask an ICE agent? I could offer up several in Dallas who might be ready to answer that question of what is the basis of that fear. But I mentioned he did it last night on Colbert.
People ask, well, is authoritarianism, you're being hyperbolic? Bull, we're being hyperbolic. I mean, if some guy jumped out of an unmarked car in a van with a mask on, tried to grab me, I mean, by definition, you're going to push back. And so these are not just authoritarian tendencies. These are authoritarian actions by an authoritarian government.
He doesn't even believe those words. He doesn't live inside of The Handmaid's Tale, but he's created a virtual reality with his words that an insane population, or better yet, a normal population that his words have made insane, are ready to believe that everyone who disagrees with them and law enforcement are a threat to their existence. So I can't yell stop at Gavin Newsom. His identity is built on this virtual reality. I know, as you know, that won't be, no matter what happened this morning in Texas, the last we hear from Newsom. And honestly, it's not just about Newsom. I would love to use my monitors, all three of the big ones on the wall, or I'd love to fill the screen of your television right now with every Democrat who is called a Republican or ICE, the Gestapo, the secret police, authoritarians, or Nazis. But I don't have enough room. There wouldn't be a TV screen big enough. There's not wall space for it to be comprehensive enough. I do have this. I have just a sampling for you. This is just a few who have said, by the way, there's no way that we should have masked agents in ICE.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
Folks getting snatched off the street by secret police who are wearing masks.
The question is, if everything is legitimate and proper, why are you wearing masks to hide your face?
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that.
The bill is actually pretty straightforward. You know, no face coverings, no masks, with certain exemptions to that.
The old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, and you compare them to those nondescript thugs who grabbed that student, that graduated student, it does look like a Gestapo operation.
We're seeing these masked agents roaming around like bank robbers, roaming around like Antifa.
As somebody who understands history, when I see ICE, I see slave patrols.
You know, we should and we will, over the course of time and over the course of the next hour, look into places where radicalization takes place. We should look into these Reddit forums where people begin to use the exact language that is inspired by these politicians. And we could look at, and we will look at today, where and how Antifa and formalized leftist violence comes together. But make no mistake, that conversation is inspired by the people you just saw on your screen. I am often very reluctant to say that violent actions of an individual is predicated by the rhetoric of a politician some thousands of miles away. But we are not in a normal America. We don't go by a week without having another example of left-wing political violence, another assassination. And at some point, these people must be held accountable. Yes, they should be banished from the conversation, but those that are left, those that are responsible, have to stop. And I ask you today, who is left that is responsible? I ask that with an open mind, a curious heart. Who is sane on the left? What Democrat is ready to look at this clown show that is now inspiring violence and say that will no longer speak for us who simply disagree? Gavin Newsom asks, what are ICE agents afraid of? The answer, Governor, is this. This is what they are afraid of. The suspect in today's attack identified as 29-year-old Joshua John. He died after his attack today from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But this story is bigger than today because we're both afraid. You and I, the story will be back again tomorrow, just like it was here 2 weeks ago with the murder of Charlie Kirk. And it makes you put everything into this larger context. I thought Daily Wire commentator Matt Walsh put it very well today on X. Imagine that we had a Democrat administration. Now imagine that a right-wing radical shot and killed one of the most influential liberals in the country on live TV. Now imagine that thousands of other conservatives shamelessly celebrated the assassination and called for more of them. Now imagine that in the same week, another right-winger shot up a country club while shouting MAGA, and another one shot up a news station and left behind a manifesto complaining about liberal bias in the media. Now imagine that a week after all those attacks, a conservative sniper perched on a rooftop fired into a Planned Parenthood clinic, killing or injuring multiple people. And imagine that that Planned Parenthood attack was just the latest in a string of them, stretching back several months.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.